you should trust people who are in it for journalism to say, actually, this is real. I did this and that to draw your attention to certain places, but I'm not faking anything. If I wanted to fake stuff, I would be an artist, not a journalist.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, Montecito Heights edition. Today, we talk with Ryan Schude. Ryan is a Midwesterner like me who moved out to California for college and never looked back. Same. He takes incredible, unique, awe-inspiring photographs that look like trick photography. But Ryan swears there's nothing up his sleeves, just extensive planning, perfect lighting, and subjects who can stand still. We'll also talk about his love of rollerblading, how he took advantage of the company he was working with to get his first epic photos, and what's good in Montecito Heights. So please welcome Ryan Schude. We are here in Montecito Heights with Ryan Schude. Is that how you say it?
That's how you say it.
Is that Polish?
You know, I was just doing some research on this because we were told it was Polish growing up. That, you know, dad's side of the family was Polish, mom's was Irish. That was the whole narrative. Turns out it only takes one person to do 23andMe for that to go out the window. And it looks like our grandpa Leo changed his name at some point from Schude to Schude. And my brother's 23andMe said vaguely Northeastern European. So Polish, German. The only place I've seen Schude was in Germany. But yeah, we were told Polish.
That's why I don't want to do 23s and
Yeah.
E's. I like the myth. I like the folklore.
Yeah.
Just leave it alone.
Yeah.
You know? So we're here in Montecito Heights. You are originally from the suburbs of Chicago, like I am.
Yep.
Do you say where in the suburbs you're from?
Yeah. Hinsdale Central was where it all happened.
What's the name of the high school?
Hinsdale Central.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was there other Hinsdale high schools?
There was a Hinsdale South.
The creativity of the Midwest.
I know.
In a previous interview that you did, you were talking about how Illinois is a great place to grow up, but it's not the greatest for creativity, and California kind of is. Mm-hmm. And I could not relate more.
Yeah.
You ended up going to college in San Francisco, the Art Institute?
Yep.
Where did you live in San Francisco?
So first, before SFAI, I went to St. Mary's, which is in the East Bay. Randomly, I did not grow up Catholic, but I applied to all the state schools up and down the coast. Didn't get into any of them because apparently it's really hard. I didn't have terrible grades, but it was just hard for transplants to go to a state school at the time. I think I did get into San Jose State, and I visited, and I was like, nah. So then I started looking into private schools, and I mean, even though it's in like this retirement community and this very small liberal arts school, which wasn't initially on my radar, it's in this beautiful campus, and it was great. I actually got a really well-rounded literary education there that I didn't expect, even though I was a business admin major. So I got my undergrad there and fell into photography along the way.
Was St. Mary's did that used to be an all-girls school?
The one in Minnesota is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you got your degree in
Business.
and then you went to San Francisco State?
Yeah, or San Francisco Art Institute.
Right.
Yeah, because, I was, like I said, rollerblading since, all of high school. And I always put it on the back burner, but that's how I got into photography. But I never took it seriously enough to learn what I was doing. I just kind of took snapshots, got more into it throughout college. But I was brought up in a situation where I felt I had to become some sort of entrepreneur or do something in business so that I could support myself. Arts were never on my radar in high school. My pre-college classes were like marketing and stats and typing. Like, I didn't even really explore arts in high school so much, aside from video and photo of rollerblading, which I didn't consider art at the time. So in college, I explored what little of an art department they had there, which was a lot of studio arts. We did Super 8 filmmaking, we did sculpture, painting, woodblock etching, a lot of traditional studio arts. My teacher there really encouraged me. I ended up applying to SFAI and they gave me a scholarship.
Oh, wow.
And, I just wanted I knew I wanted to go in photography, but I didn't know how smart it was to go without any formal education at all. So I was like, let me at least get a year under my belt at the art school and see what that's like.
I There had to be something going on as an undergrad for you to have this bug. Was it a can you nail it down to one picture or an assignment you had? Was there one thing that really clicked
It
for you?
was rollerblading. It was trying to figure out how to capture what we were doing. So in that sense, it wasn't even really art yet. It was still documenting, and it was trying to find a really technical way to document this thing. And then throughout that, you just naturally experiment and start finding other fun things to do. Because I was taking those studio art classes, if I was to say there was another kind of pivot point that allowed me to look at photography more as an art form, it was the Super 8 film class, because that professor very much showed us Lee Brackage and all these guys who were just like scratching on the negs and making these wild art films. And so I would say that class more than anything opened my eyes to like, oh, we can use this as a creative form of expression.
Did you guys develop your own Super 8?
No.
You sent it out.
Yeah, we sent the Super 8 out, but I did learn to develop film in a closet. This is how like small, there was no photo department at the school, but I was shooting for the newspaper, and the newspaper was one guy who taught me how to develop in a closet. We printed all the negs. There wasn't a digital camera yet, so I learned that all before going to art school, just shooting like soccer and baseball for the school newspaper.
God bless journalism.
I know.
I ask people all the time, were you part of the college newspaper? And they're like, no. And I'm like, I can't imagine a better place to learn.
Yeah, it was great.
And when your peers are seeing what you do every day, or every week, I guess nowadays, no better feedback.
Right.
Especially if they're strangers.
Yeah.
And otherwise you paint a painting and it ends up in a gallery somewhere. 18 people drinking wine see it. Who cares?
Right.
So the other thing that interests me about this story is I get a lot of mixed messages about art school.
Yeah.
And how it's a total waste of time and it's only for rich kids who don't know what they want to do. Mm-hmm. But it seems like for you, it actually accomplished what it was supposed to.
Yeah, especially SFAI, because they're so heavily conceptual based. Like even though I was going in wanting to shoot blading and learn these tech things that they didn't care about, again, the classes that were available to me there, and this was all proximity. I loved San Francisco. Being in the East Bay, I would spend more time in San Francisco than anywhere else because that's where everything was happening. So I knew I wanted to go there no matter what, and it was, there was a trade school, there was Academy of Art, but that, even then, as little as I knew about art versus craft, I was like, this looks like that, what you're talking about, the waste of time, where it was like, I'm just going to spend too much money on this school, and it's just going to teach me like corny studio stuff. Whereas this other school was where all the cool kids were. They were doing wild shit, and I wanted to be in that world. And thankfully, they let me in. But I wouldn't say it was a waste of time. I would say it opened my eyes even further. It was a whole nother level than the classes I was taking at St. Mary's, obviously. The professors there were all over the place as far as where they took conceptual art, but they took it in places I didn't expect. And I only did go there for a year, but that was definitely an eye-opening experience that influenced everything I did from then forward.
Right after that year, did you move to LA?
No, so I kind of flailed around SF, and I was traveling a bunch, shooting rollerblading. I started submitting to a magazine in San Diego.
You loved rollerblading.
I mean, it was my life. For 12 years, I'd say it was all I thought about.
This is a little bit shocking to me.
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm older than you.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, roller skating was like huge.
Right.
Like super huge.
Yeah.
And when rollerblading happened, a lot of us look down on it.
Oh, I mean, still, it's had stigma since day one. There was like a few years where it got popular, but not with the cool kids. It was popular worldwide because of this trend, but it very quickly became out of fashion and went back to just being mocked. And
You didn't care.
well, what are you gonna do? I grew up skateboarding. I didn't want to fall in line with whatever. I still skateboarded, snowboarded. So to me, it didn't make a difference. Like, just because people thought this, I mean, if I cared about shit like that, I wouldn't have done gymnastics either. Like I would have played football or something.
The people who did make it cool,
Yeah,
hockey players.
sure. I mean, they started to find a way to bring some aggression into it. And then it started basically copycatting skateboarding as far as rails and gaps and all these
Yes.
big stunts, which were very much what we were involved in. So,
You were doing that stuff too?
oh yeah, big
Well,
time.
I guess as a gymnast, you're perfectly suited
Well,
for weird tricks in the
to
sky,
some
flipping.
there was we didn't do a ton of the ramp and flip stuff. I mean, that was certainly an aspect, but this was more just pure street rails and big gaps off stairs, and that was my thing. So I'll show you some clips later, but
Okay.
this dominated everything. So I was picking up work shooting little league kids for like $10 an hour or whatever it was at the time, and just trying to pay rent, submitting to the magazine, traveling around, shooting stuff on spec. Eventually got a job as a photo editor. So I moved down to San Diego, and that was my first full-time job out of school. Which
Photo editor where?
it's called Daily Bread Magazine.
Okay.
And from 2003 to almost 2007, I was the photo editor and staff photographer because it's such a small organization. I had to shoot 90% of it, but as much as we could afford to bring on contributors, I managed them as well. So I was traveling all over the world, and just it was a dream job.
They had a budget to travel you everywhere?
We'd work it out with the sponsors for events.
Wow.
And it wasn't often, but yeah, there was a few instances where I'd end up in Paris and then Barcelona, and
Yes.
yeah, it was great. And a lot of just going to the East Coast, going to where the big competitions were, going on tour with a certain team from time to time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then it went under.
Of course.
Yeah.
What got you to LA?
So when the magazine went under, I knew that San Diego was too small of a market to, again, people make it happen, but for the most part, if you're going to be a commercial photographer, unless you want to do weddings on the side, why not go to LA? It's 2 hours away. I had friends here who were already assisting, which was the best way to kind of get the knowledge in commercial photography. Because even though I had done, fine art stuff, and then I had done all this rollerblading stuff, I didn't have anything in my book that was appropriate to get work as a commercial photographer. So I was like, I got to start from scratch. I don't know what that looks like, but I think assisting is the way. And because I knew my friend was able to, at least pay his rent assisting other photographers and learn what real lighting looks like. But even assisting you can't like apply to be an assistant. It's very word of mouth. It's very much, you got to be entrenched in the community. So while that was happening, I got a job at a rental house. And again, I'm 27 years old. I have undergraduate degree in business, and I'm making $10 an hour at a rental house as a clerk.
Oh my God.
So this felt to some extent a bit like, what the fuck am I doing?
Where were you living?
I first moved to Mid-City. Actually, scratch that. The first place I moved for just a month or two was Santa Fe and Olympic in a warehouse / art gallery called the Treehouse.
Way before downtown was cool.
Exactly. It was rugged. And that corner is still rugged, but this was insane. But we had, my buddy started, he's from Detroit, also a blader. And it was just a cool place to be.
Well, was downtown a great place to rollerblade because nobody was out there?
Yeah.
Or was there
I mean,
too many potholes and shitty roads?
to some extent, but, I had, people throw trauma around a lot. So I'm hesitant to bring that up in this conversation. But to be honest, the way the magazine went under and the way I had kind of this quarter life crisis about starting over at 27, I had to remove myself from rollerblading at that point.
Oh.
And I didn't want to. I still loved it. I still skated. But as far as work went, I was just focused on being at the rental house, building a whole new portfolio. They let me take all the gear I could take for free. And this is like, I knew this wasn't going to be forever. And I knew I had to take advantage of it. So this is actually how these big scenes that I do now spawned. Because I could just, like a kid in a candy store, go nuts. And they didn't realize when they extended that offer to all their employees that I would be the guy to really take advantage of it this way. So I'm taking out $4,000 rentals and putting on these massive productions that, I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out.
They're like, you can have whatever you want. I'll take everything.
Yeah. And I did for way too long than they were comfortable with. But they really supported me, and they were a huge help.
Let's give them a shout out.
Pix, unfortunately, is no longer around.
No!
I know.
Obama!
Yeah. They were great, though. Pix Rentals then became PRS for a minute, but Robert was my manager, and he was super helpful, and the owner knew what was going on, although I never saw him, but he didn't care, so it was just great.
Let's fast forward to now. I saw something that you did, and I still don't even remember where it is, but it was this big spectacular thing at an intersection. I want to say there was a balloon flying. Like, you've got so much going on.
Yeah.
Which is great. In a way, because, okay, we both grew up in Illinois, and I'm sure your high school took you to the Art Institute just like mine. And there's that great George Surratt of the people in the park.
Oh, the needlepoint?
Yeah,
not called
pointillism.
Pointillism, yeah.
Where, you see it in the book, and the teacher says, yeah, they're all little dots, but then you go and you see the fucking dots.
It's insane.
And you're like, George Surratt, you son of a gun.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about you, that there's so much detail in your photographs that I want it blown up, and I want to look at it in person because there's so much happening. And then there's another part of me that's like, well, Tony, all of this is fake. This isn't God's light, first of all, because you're shaking your head. You're saying, yes, it is real. But there's lights everywhere. Just like we're in your garage right now, and there's 8 lamps on. And they're all old, and it's like warm light. Yeah. I mean, they're all like vintage, and it's great. And I feel like that's symbolic of how we'll see.
Yeah.
Of how you light your scenes. But also, it seems to me that there's got to be a lot of Photoshop going on, or layers or whatever. And you're saying, no, you're shaking your head. That all happens when you click the button?
So it's a huge point of contention for me because of one journalist, in fact.
Who?
I don't remember their name, but...
Good for you.
Here's the story.
Damn you, Bill Plaschke.
Well, first of all, just the disclaimer in the beginning. Everything is shot and directed and lit for one take. Wow. Now, that doesn't mean we don't shoot 30 tries to get everyone, because everyone's doing something crazy.
Yeah.
And it's wild and it's all over the place. So you got to rehearse, and you might as well shoot while you're doing it.
Okay.
So out of all the shoots you see, you could certainly pull one frame from any of them, and it wouldn't look much different than the final product.
Yeah.
There does end up being compositing for most of them, but it's not this wizardry where I'm pulling elements in from other... I'm not a great retoucher. I am just blending layers, people with their real backgrounds. I'm not cutting them out and moving them around.
Right.
And there's actually a few I can point to on the site which actually were one take. Famously one that was the biggest one I ever did, because the client was Motorola, and we had to shoot it on their phone, and they said you couldn't composite it, and you had to get it in one shot. And I'm like, okay, we're renting out Coney Island. There's a lot of pressure here. You got 70 people, this is insane. But I knew I could do it because that's how we did every other shoot.
Right.
So it is all set up for one. I don't Photoshop lights out. They're just outside a frame. And, as far as the difference between if you saw an image right from camera and whatever other retouching, it's like dodging and burning and just opening up shadows in different places and bringing attention to where the action is.
Which nowadays even journalists do.
Of course. And they should. And the whole idea that journalism is this pure thing and it has to be right at camera with no adjustments is ridiculous, because the moment you take a picture, it's not reality. It's a picture. Mm-hmm. So for them to hide behind this thing like, no, it's real, because I was like, oh, it's a half stop underexposed. You're not going to let that guy open up the shadows because that's your rule? That's so dumb. Like,
and in the olden times, they would dodge and burn, and it was so blatant that we can see it today. We're like, what's wrong with that guy's face?
Right, because it's so hard to do that in a enlarger.
Yeah.
And why not use these tools that we have? And, you know, of course, some people are going to take advantage of it, but you should trust people who are in it for journalism to say, actually, this is real. I did this and that to draw your attention to certain places, but I'm not faking anything.
Right.
If I wanted to fake stuff, I would be an artist, not a journalist. Right.
I got to say, now that you're telling me this, there's a picture that you have of a woman in a bathtub and a toaster's going into the bathtub. And the whole scene is crazy. But to me, the craziest part is the cat.
Yeah.
There's a cat on either a stool or on the sink.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, clearly he put that in there, because no cat's going to be that obedient.
Okay. So there's so much to go into about that. And first, I want to say that it is up in the Torrance Art Museum right now, 4 feet big. You should go check it out, because seeing those details on that scale, like you said, is so different than seeing on that computer.
Yeah.
And the cat is absolutely up on that radiator. And in fact, it's Lauren Randolph's cat.
Lauren Lemon?
She's in the bathtub.
What? Wait that's her?
Yeah.
See, this is, again, you're right.
Yeah.
This is why I got to see it in 4 feet.
Yeah.
Because I think I even saw it on my phone, the worst way to see something.
But you can pinch and zoom on the phone, but it's still, you're going to lose detail. Go to Torrance.
How about that?
Yeah, so that was not too long after I first met her. She had just moved to LA. She was wrapping up a project about shooting a portrait of herself every day of the year. It was called the 365 thing. It was this thing people did on Flickr at the time.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to her about it, and I was like, I couldn't imagine doing that. I would get so sick of it. It's so much work. Congratulations, though. You must be so burnt out on it. And then that idea, I was like, well, we should celebrate this in some conceptual way that says you're burnt out. So literally frying herself in the bathtub with the toaster was the literal, way to, and that's her sister, Caitlin, is trying to unplug the toaster before it hits the water. So she doesn't die. It's kind of this dark but light story, but that's also all very real. Like, her cat Millie, R.I.P., was on the radiator for not very long because cats don't listen. We had her throw the toaster in the water dozens of times because to get that right moment when it splashes and the water comes up.
That splash is all real.
It's all real.
Ryan, you evil genius.
I mean, it took the patience of her to be in this bathtub with... it was probably, it's not like we had a heater on it, so she was probably freezing in the studio.
Wow.
I handed it all to them, and my brother Collins did the set design on that one, and it was just a fun kind of experiment in the early days of building sets.
Approximately how long from when Lauren goes into the tub the first time until you're satisfied are we talking?
Under an hour, maybe closer to a half hour. It's hard to say, but that would be a fun thing to look back at the files because it's all time coded. I would say somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes.
There's another one of I just think talking about animals on these things are fun.
Yeah.
Because animals are hard to work with.
Oh my God, impossible.
And cats for sure. I've got 2, and
don't listen for shit
unless they're hungry.
Right. I don't remember. Yeah, I wonder if we bribed the cat.
But I heard that through the back end. I used to work with a vegan who used to complain about the circus and say that they would torture them with food and pain and shit. And I was like, how can I use this in a positive way?
Right.
And so therefore, I only take pictures of my cats right before they're about to eat. That's the only time they care about me.
Yeah. And they give you a look?
They'll follow me to the kitchen. They'll follow me wherever I'm going because they're like, ooh, now's the time.
Yeah.
But anyhow, you did one a little short movie, Me and My Arrow,
Yeah.
with a corgi.
Also, Caitlin Randolph with her corgi. Yeah.
Really? Going down. That's her
Yeah.
walking the dog.
Yeah, on Broadway downtown.
You know, I guess I've never met the sister.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I'm surprised you guys are both in Los Feliz walking around all the time, right?
we are, but she's probably walking around more than I am.
Yeah, okay. Fair
Anyhow, walking down looks like Broadway,
Yeah.
and
Thanks.
you're a busy man. That phone should be ringing more.
I'm going to turn this.
It should be
ringer
ringing
off.
more. Dude, you're one of the best right now happening. Wouldn't you agree?
No, but I appreciate it.
Do you have a manager?
Yes.
Okay, because I'll be the manager. If
Okay.
that person's not hyping you
I
up
could always
enough.
use more. We're not exclusive. It's okay.
So, okay, she's walking her dog down Broadway, this adorable corgi. She spills a bag, and it looks like it's Cheetos.
Sure is.
Those are Cheetos?
Yeah.
Was it cool for the dog to eat these Cheetos?
I mean, we didn't realize how cool Arrow would think it was until it happens, because we're in the middle of the intersection, and this is all live downtown. Traffic's coming. People are crossing. They're not hired. They're just...
None of those people are extras?
No, civilians, and she spilled the Cheetos in a way that was meant to really go after the slow motion aspect of that. And then what we realized after the fact was it was more interesting to watch Arrow eat the Cheetos than it was for the spill. Because, that moment is really hard to fake, where you want everything to go up at once. I got her this vape pen. I was like, the vape pen should go flying. I want the Cheetos. You totally should eat shit in the middle of the intersection. And that's a lot to ask for. So thankful that Arrow stepped in and was like, I'm going to be the star of the show. And just was mowing those Cheetos. And then sprinting at the camera afterwards is another bonus we didn't expect.
How did you get Arrow to look at the camera during that sprint?
Because
It's all eyes on that lens is what it looks like.
I think I just yelled and had him come. Yeah, I don't really remember. I think we got lucky too. But we had a great DP, Cody Smith, on that one. And that was our whole crew. A lot of these shoots are very small personal projects. So it was me, Cody, and Caitlin, and just figuring it out.
Now, some of the shoots have it's a big production.
Sure.
There's one that you did about a bus. It looks like an old Greyhound bus from like the 60s or 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either picking up or dropping off somebody in front of a telephone booth.
Mm-hmm.
RIP telephone booths.
Yeah.
And looking at the credits on your Instagram, there's a long list of people from costumers, which is great because a lot of that looked vintage too.
Yeah.
And perfect. And then there's a character that I'm a little bit more hands-on. As you see, I have a crew of me, and then there's Jordan waiting for this. And that's it. And I don't mind working on teams, but it can be annoying.
Yeah.
And so, is a creative director a friend or a foe?
Always a friend, but on that shoot, I'm trying to remember who was listed as that.
I don't want you to name names. I'm just asking from one aspiring creative person to a real creative person. I don't want somebody telling me that dog can't eat those Cheetos.
Oh my God. Well, now the only person who's telling you not to do something is the producer.
Oh.
And they're a problem. And I've come into that on commercial sets where I was about to do this big spill, as I like to do, and the producer stops us and is like, "You're going to get ketchup on the rug." And I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me? No, you don't come in and stop right when we're gearing up. I'm about to count the actor down." I got the actual creative directors from the agency there, and they're all for it because they don't care if we spill ketchup on the rug. You can clean it up. But this producer all of a sudden is looking at their bottom line and how much money they can put in their pocket, and I never forgave him for that.
Good.
I felt really bad about it, but the creative director is never going to stop you. Well, not that I can remember. They're always wanting to get as wild as you do. So I love them, and I love collaborating with them in a way that is, just getting out of your own head. Because the bus shoot, for example, I was the creative director because that was all me as a personal project.
Oh, was it?
But when it's an advertising shoot and you do have a real creative director on there, it's so nice to be able to bounce ideas off other people and get inspiration because you're thinking about a million different things, and sometimes new idea isn't one of them. Sometimes it's whether there's going to be ketchup on the carpet or not. And so, no, I welcome them when we have
Really?
the opportunity to work with them. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So rarely, if not never, does a creative person veto an idea that you have.
They may veto an idea, but again, if it's a paid gig and I'm working for someone, I'm there to carry out their vision. So I don't get, it's not an ego thing for me. It's like, if they don't like it, fine. It's not for me. I can go make my fine art and then have all the control I want on the side. But when I'm working for someone, let's do what they need. And so absolutely, I'm going to do that 100% of the time and never be butthurt about it.
I'm so glad to hear that. I think that's also maybe a Midwestern thing too. That we're easier to work with than your average person.
I mean, I always love the metaphor that, like, as you start on the East Coast and move westward, there's like a softness that arises. So, like, East Coast can be pretty hard edge and they have their ways, and then as you move over, the Midwest is kind of a little bit easier, and maybe, you know, it's cliche and you can't generalize the whole region, but they might be friendlier and reach out more. And then as you get towards the West Coast, it's super laid back, but maybe then in like a passive way. So it's a weird transition as you go across the coast. But yeah, and we have pride for the Midwest, so we like to say we're the easiest to work with. But
Well, we're here in Montecito Heights.
yeah, when people ask where we live, I always say it's near Highland Park because that's all they know about Northeast LA. But yeah, they're pretty similar. I wouldn't even say this is more hilly because there's a hilly aspect to Highland Park as it goes into Mount Washington, which is also directly across the way. And so they all kind of feel like the same to me. I lived in Cypress Park for a while, and it's a pretty similar vibe there. Lincoln Heights, Glassell Park, all is kind of this same Northeast LA, Nila, they're calling it now. So.
What attracted you to this area?
Well, like I said, I first moved to the crazy warehouse downtown, but then my brother moved here, and there wasn't another spot for him in the warehouse, so we got an apartment in Mid-City, and that's just a place that's so random. It's like they happened to have a great apartment at a good price that had 2 parking spots. That's how we ended up there. But
Parking.
yeah, he had this vision of this warehouse space that he wanted to build out. And so he found a spot in Cypress Park and convinced me and my other buddy, Dan Busta, who's a photographer, to move there and start this photo studio. And so we did. It's still there. It's called The Forge. He's still running it. I left there probably in 2015. Mm-hmm. And I was so comfortable with the neighborhood, I moved to a little house down the street in Cypress Park for a while. Then when I met my wife, Agatha, we moved to South Pass for a little bit, which is lovely but expensive. So back to Montecito Heights, where she was actually living here before we met. And it was just a great place to come back to. There's a beautiful view. We'll go up there afterwards.
Okay.
It's just... You know, it's walkable in a way, even though it's hilly. It's not too far. You can walk to Highland Park. So there's a lot here.
Is there food spots in Montecito Heights,
Oh, yeah.
or do you have to go to Highland Park?
Our grocery store is here, which is Fresco's, and Deb's is here. That's like the main thing that people know. If you say what's in Montecito Heights, it's Deb's Park.
Deb's Park.
Yeah.
Do you have a dog?
No.
What do you do at this park?
There's a beautiful hike up to the lake, and I mean,
What lake?
Lake is a stretch. I guess it's called Deb's Lake, but it's
She's got a lake too.
It's a little pond, but yeah. How many water features are in parks around here? You know, you have Echo Park Lake. The reservoir I don't think counts because you can't get near it. But
Right.
at Deb's, you walk right up and there's ducks and
Huh.
turtles and people walking their dog. And it's an amazing view of all around.
Have you shot anything at
Oh,
this?
yeah.
Oh,
So,
have you?
I don't know if you've seen the Them and Theirs series, which is about people in their cars.
Yes.
So I've done both a still version of a woman with her motorcycle there, and then we made a whole little short film around it.
One of the things that you did that I liked a lot was it was a family. They looked like a mixed race family taking a hike, and I think it was in Monrovia. It was a falls.
Yeah, Hermit Falls.
Hermit Falls.
Yeah.
Was that Monrovia?
So Hermit Falls is
'Cause at first-
not quite. It's close. It's on the way there. It is Angeles Crest
Uh-huh.
or Angeles Forest. I think it's closer to Sierra Madre, but yeah, around there.
Because at first I thought it was this place I used to hike in Pacific Palisades, but which had a little baby waterfall.
Right.
Like not much. Only if it just rained will you see it.
Right.
But this seemed like there's a lot of water going on there, and even some creatures in the water. Were those dogs? Were they?
Well, the family did bring a dog, so I don't think we saw many fish that day. But yeah, there's probably just like little turtles and fish. It's a small
Yeah.
creek. The waterfall is actually not that massive, but it is a fun little hike. And if you've been to Adams Pack Station, which is an amazing place as a tourist of LA, and I like to go to all these places, go visit there. From there, you can grab lunch, walk down to Hermit Falls. You can jump off a rock into it.
Yeah. No. Did you do that?
Oh yeah,
What?
not that day, but yeah.
Well, I guess you're a gymnast. You don't mind.
There's a little one that's like 10 feet, and then there's a 40-foot one. I've done both, but it's just a cool scene because it's like this eclectic mix of people from all over LA show up there, and I don't know, you feel like you're in a different country just because you have to hike a mile to get there, and like, how did all these people spring up here? And there's families, and somehow old people get there, and
Which is why I love LA.
yeah,
Just drive 20 minutes
yeah,
and you're in Montecito Heights.
Yeah.
Drive another 20 minutes and you're in a totally different place. And you get it why so many movies are filmed here, because you can pretend that it's some other place other than California.
absolutely.
And that's another reason I loved that shoot was, well, first of all, I liked it because maybe there's just a cynical part of me. I'm like, this bastard, he's always up to something. Like, what? But on that one, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
It is nature.
Yeah.
Like, I don't imagine that you hauled up friggin' 18 tons of equipment.
No, there's no lights. We just basically, and this was during, COVID, when there was a lull in between surges, but you still weren't going to go into a studio and shoot, and you still didn't want to have a lot of people from different households. So that family is a real family. It's basically me and a co-director and a DP and one assistant for sound and switching lenses, but very small crew. And it was a huge hustle because of that. Getting down to that water feature is a huge hike downhill, and then you got to go back up. And the poor French bulldog was the casualty in there. It passed out, and it was like, is it going to be okay? But it just needed a little bit of water. And those wagons, the whole thing was for this wagon company, and that thing became very heavy going back up. There's a lot of reasons why that became a struggle, but it worked out in the end.
Let me ask you about one more commercial. This was on the beach, and it was all these women taking off their clothes, Ryan,
Yeah.
and jumping into the ocean.
Yeah.
And there was another animal in that one.
Uh-huh.
And
Ginty.
I'm sorry?
Ginty.
Ginty was the name of
Yeah.
the dog?
Yeah.
It made me think of a whole bunch of things. First, lens flare.
Yeah.
And I was like, is that real lens flare? And it looked real, but you never know.
Well, if you're talking about when they're actually going into the sea, then absolutely, because we were planning to shoot into the sun, and there's all sorts of reasons why that was insane. But again, during COVID, and it's all the way in England, and
Oh, that wasn't here.
yeah, so I have a production company rep in UK who brought me out for this shoot. And it's a very conservative brand, and there's an ad agency in between who very much wanted to get everyone naked. And I was like, this does not seem appropriate for this brand, but I'm not there to make that decision. Again, you asked about creative directors earlier. They're the ones generally trying to push it further even because they want to make something compelling and not just another run-of-the-mill ad. So we had kind of a lot of back and forth about that. I was like, look, I'm happy to do it. I'm not generally your nude lifestyle guy, but I could figure it out, and we're going to tell a story along the way. I'm very much interested in that, not just like getting them naked for shock value.
Right.
So there was a lot of elements. It's England, so it could have rained. It could have been overcast. We would have had to use fake sun flare, but we didn't. Everything was perfect. The sun was out all day. The sea was very cold, and there's like consideration about how long the women can be in the water for at a time because you can start to break down. They say, 10 minutes per degree. I forget what the equation was, but there was like someone was watching a clock.
Good.
But the women, they were all actual real cold water swimmers.
Oh.
So they were used to it. They were like, this is great. This is no problem. We can stay in all day.
Wow.
The dog was great. There's a big problem about whether the dog was going to be able to carry the shoe towards us. And it's funny you bring that up because I ripped myself off in that from the Arrow, the Corgi shoe.
How about that?
Yeah, so because of that Arrow, the Corgi shot at the end of running towards the lens, we completely recreated that with that dog bringing the shoe towards the camera.
Was that a trained dog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Ginty was a pro.
Because that's a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
Get a dog to carry a shoe.
Well, especially a little dog.
Right.
And yeah, so at first we wanted to try all these other items of clothing that were just too big. Like the big puffer jacket wasn't going to work, Ginty was swallowed by that thing. So thankfully, I thought that hiking boot would be too heavy, but she did it at least a handful of times.
Do you feel offended when people compare you to David LaChapelle?
No, I have a different photographer who I'm compared to more, and I always like to bring up LaChapelle because I think he's a more appropriate answer.
Oh, good.
Because he's very corny and gaudy, and all the negative aspects of my work I like to associate with him because he just doesn't give a fuck, and he's a great inspiration for pushing limits in that way. I don't go in the way of fashion and, again, nudity that he does.
Right.
I'm less interested in it than telling a story, but I do like the kind of exaggerated, very 90s vibe of his work.
And he does juice up his colors
Yeah.
and lights and all that
Well,
stuff.
that, a lot of that's built into the content. It's juiced up because they're wearing bright colors and his backgrounds are bright, and he's very much carefully art directing that stuff himself.
Yeah. Well, there's a picture that I've always loved of the Hilton sisters in front of this motel on, I think it's La Brea, near Mid-City. And one day I passed this motel and I'm like, I've had this picture on my wall for 15 years. I can't believe this is a real motel. But also, the reason I passed it a million times and never recognized it is because he juiced up the colors so much
Right.
that it didn't seem like a real place.
Right.
Your stuff does seem real, even though for that instance, you can't believe this cat is sitting there politely as this toaster is about to fry up our good friend Lauren. But I'm glad to hear that you're not upset by that comparison.
No, and that was a time and place for this very saturated look. I do try and toe the line more because the actions are so outrageous. I want to tone down the visual a little bit to kind of find a balance where people aren't, again, dismissing it as being just Photoshop, which they're still going to do no matter what. I can't control that.
Can we talk about creativity real quick? Because I went to the College of Creative Studies in Santa Barbara. And creativity to me was something I was paranoid about when I was young. And I asked the professor who got me into there, I was like, I was like maybe 22 years old. And I was like, I am filled with ideas right now. Is it ever going to go away? Should I like write as much as I can now before it goes? And she was like, why would you be worried about that? And I said, all my favorite musicians suck after like the third album.
Mm-hmm. True.
And those are only like 10 songs each. And then it's over. Like you really only have 30 good songs in you,
Mm-hmm.
and only 3 of them are going to be hits. That terrifies me. And she was like, you're not here to write songs.
Right.
And your question isn't about songwriting. It's about creativity. And she said, as long as you allow it to happen, it will always be there.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way about creativity?
I do, but I relate to both sentiments because I also heard some wild quote from Steve Jobs that was like, any art made after the age of 30 is shit. And I always hated him for that. And there's too many good examples to prove otherwise. Willie Nelson is still making music, and the problem with why we think we don't grow attached to a band's first, second, third album. And so there's a lot of history that makes us feel about music a certain way that isn't necessarily about whether they got better or more creative or not.
Yes.
And so it's a tricky thing to compare music to creativity in writing. How many authors do you know who have written their best books in their twilight years?
Bukowski, his whole career was...
Yeah.
I mean, his best work was after 50.
Yeah. I mean, Klosterman, to have a more contemporary example, to me, is writing his best work now. And some people get better and better, and others, it's just how the public views it.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about me coming up with ideas in my older age. I'm worried about how people receive it from someone in my older age.
Really?
But another perfect example against that is my mother-in-law. She is 82 years old. She's been painting for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time in her life, in the last 4 years, has gained a crazy amount of notoriety. She's in the Venice Biennale this year. Like, her career has exploded after being totally ignored for the majority of her life. So there's a lot you could say about how that happens, and the art world's a weird place. So
Yeah.
I'm not waiting around for that, but the fact is that she stayed true to what she was doing. She still loved it, and I would say arguably her work is still getting better.
And you just took a beautiful portrait of her.
Absolutely, and that was, what a privilege to be able to do that, and crossing over with fine art and journalism in a way, if you want to call LA Mag journalism, but it's it is what it is.
My buddy Joseph Capsh is over there, so shout out Joseph.
Oh yeah, I think I emailed him the file.
What hill was that you posed her on?
So that's her backyard. So it's in unincorporated area. The nearest actual town is Mountain Center, but it's actually not anywhere near there. Per your other thing, I'm hesitant to reveal the actual location.
All right, fair enough.
It's in between Idlewild and Palm Desert.
Okay, so that away.
Yeah.
Okay, because it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I'm a weirdo. I want to know every inch of LA.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing this stupid podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, that does not look familiar.
No.
So I'm glad to hear I was right.
But I think to some extent it could have been. There's the Montecito Heights open space to bring it back locally to the neighborhood. I think I could make a pretty similar photo up there. There's just like the pine trees were the big distinguishing character, but they have those in Debs Park too. So,
but you want to be in her backyard.
Yeah, that was the point.
Yeah. Let's continue real quick with creativity. For people who have what's called writer's block, does that happen with photographers?
Yeah, I think I have this conversation quite a bit with my photo friends, and a lot of us are in a collective called This Is a Photo Blog, where we give each other photo assignments and just try and keep that muscle going. And it's back to like Photo 101 class, where it could be something simple like go take a portrait of your friends, but it's just to keep you busy. And I see people fall off all the time, myself included, where you either half-ass it or uh, God willing, you're too busy, or you just don't have an idea and you're not inspired. So I think it happens with every creative pursuit. But to me, I like to just have something, even if it's mundane, to always go out and do because something's going to spark. I also am part of a group called Art of Freelance, which is 2 times a year for 10 weeks at a time. You declare a project. Actually, the bus thing is what I did for that. And at the end of 10 weeks, you show your cohort, which is a group of about 8 people, what you did. And being held accountable to people and saying you're going to do something encourages you to do it. And I can't speak enough about having that type of community around you.
Do you have a notebook where you sketch out these ideas, like the bus and the bathtub and stuff? So you're not in your head. I would hope that you have way more ideas than you've already shot. Or do you not work that way?
It comes and goes. Yeah, I've got a few sitting on the back burner right now, but yeah, sometimes there's really nothing there, which is why it's nice to have an outside assignment. I like doing commercial work for that same reason because you have an impetus besides just pure creativity to go from.
Yeah.
And you can bounce ideas off with the creative director, whoever's in charge. But yeah, I try and keep a running list of ideas and execute them as much. And there's also shoots that I've been sitting on that I need to get to. So like at this point, I'm working on a new book project about small museums in LA. I have 20 of those shoots that need to be out there. So I got more than enough to go back to and work on and retouch. But
One of the ones that you put on Instagram was a black couple at a museum of miniatures.
yeah,
Was that the same museum of miniatures that was across the street from LACMA?
I think what you're talking about is it used to be called the Craft and Folk Art Museum.
Well, there's that one that was a little bit east of LACMA, but I thought there was like a true full-blown miniatures
Oh,
one.
maybe there was that I don't know about.
Okay.
I would have guessed that one of her pieces ended up at the Craft and Folk Art Museum, but I don't know.
And it was a long time ago.
They also have some of her pieces at the Autry right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So my question to you about that picture was, did you arrange those pictures to be like that?
So we walked into the living room, and it's Karen Collins is the artist, and her husband Eddie, who builds all the shadow boxes that her clay sculptures go into. And they knew we were coming, so they had arranged the room in a way that kind of had everything at our disposal. And so at first we had shot, a handful of them individually, but then we did do quite a bit of rearranging to create a diorama of the dioramas in the space. There wasn't a lot of room to move around, so we could only do so much. But yeah, we spent a good hour, me and the guy who insinuated the whole project, Todd LaRue, who had been to 650 of these museums.
Wow.
He had already been to her house before a couple times and included her in another exhibition at the library that he curated. So he had a sense of what we were going to do, and then it all kind of just came together.
Is there something, we'll end it with this. Is there something that you are trying to say or imply when you have all this action happening in one frame?
I don't think the reason why there's so much going on in one shot is to say overarching or to have an overarching point across all the work. It's more each photo tells its own story, and so they're really only connected by the approach and the style with the lighting and the wardrobe and props and locations. Common themes pop up, but the individual stories have totally random paths you wouldn't expect until we got in and talked about each one separately. Some of them are autobiographical, like the suitcase getting thrown off the balcony at my old Saturn Street apartment. I witnessed my parents go through that in front of me. My mom literally throwing my dad's shit out onto the street. So that one really has an impact for me to look back on.
How old were you when you saw that?
Uh, Probably 12 or 13. Yeah, it was tough. So
No wonder you're taking that picture.
sure.
Was it emotional to do that shoot?
You know what? I'm pretty good at repressing my feelings. So I honestly did not make the connection until after it was done. I think I had subconsciously blocked it out. I knew I wanted to create that cliche, but I always, during the whole like building and the pre-production of that shoot, I looked at it as that scene in a movie. I didn't talk about it as that scene from my childhood until I finished it and spent so many hours staring at it. I'm like, oh my God, how have I not acknowledged that this is something that I clearly made because of this, long kind of hidden fear and memory of this event.
Is this why women want us to go to therapy?
Absolutely. I think everyone should go to therapy. I'm a huge fan.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, whatever makes your art, right on. But I love that picture. But again, I thought it was trick. I thought there's strings on this thing.
Well, I'm glad we brought this full circle because that's one of the few that is one shot. Huh. And the reason that was able to do that, because I had a lot of options that I wanted to play with, but the only thing that's moving in that is the woman in the suitcase. So since everyone else had to maintain the same pose over and over again, they didn't really change as much as they started to in the future ones. And that was one of the very first ones I did. And I will say, actually, the first one I did when I got to LA and I had all the access to the equipment. So I hadn't started playing around with getting crazy with every single pocket. That was very much about that one action. Everyone else held still. So to me, it was worth being able to say it was one shot to not make it a composite.
Is there a spotlight on the suitcase?
Everyone has their own spotlight.
So there's a lot of lights on that.
There's a reason why that has that very specific look, which does not feel natural by any means because nothing looks like that.
Yeah.
It's all these spotlights that are focused in on just the subject. So each subject has their own light. And then even further, I've used that approach when I've lit scenes more broadly, but I'll go in and burn in light to give it that more spotlit effect.
I keep saying this is my last question.
Hey, we got all day.
Not according to Jordan, we don't. Can I imagine that you do a giant photo one day with 100 different elements, maybe 200 different elements, really just to show, just kind of show off. Be like, bitch, look at what I can do.
Well, I think that's what that Coney Island Motorola shoot was all about. And I don't know if you've seen it, but
I don't think I have.
That had 70 people in it, and that's just people. If you factor in all the other elements, there's certainly over 100, and there's a lot of shit going on, and I did not do it to prove I could do something like that. In fact, if it was up to me, it would have been a smaller scale to some. It kind of was up to me, and then it wasn't. It kind of snowballed from its inception, but Motorola was the one who told me I had to do it in one shot. So there's no compositing in that one, and we shot it on a phone with constant lighting. So it's all these things that were not in my wheelhouse as far as I knew I could figure it out, but that's not how I typically worked.
You took the picture on a Motorola, like a Razor or something like that?
It was called the Moto X. It was like their first 21 megapixel phone. So we were showing off, it was the highest resolution of a phone at the time. And the idea was you single out each pocket. We made a grid, a 7x3 grid. And each pocket you could zoom in and see the detail. Wow. And then there was a motion aspect to each detail too. So we shot a little short film for each grid spot.
You know, my mom worked at the Motorola headquarters in Palatine.
Yeah, right next to Schaumburg. yeah, I've been there.
Well, maybe technically Schaumburg, yeah.
Yeah, I think my cousin used to mow the lawn there.
It's a big-ass lawn.
Yeah, I know. It's a beautiful campus.
You've been fantastic with your time. Thank you so much. People should follow you on Instagram. It's just your name?
Yeah, Ryan Schude.
Are you on Flickr?
I still am. I don't update there because they unless you subscribe, you run out of photos you can post.
You don't pay for Pro?
I did for so many years, but then I was like, why? I don't use it anymore. I love it because I still think it's the best platform to look at photos.
It is.
But no one's there. It's a lot of bird watchers, and I love that too, but I need to use social media in a way to get more work and not just to have an archive. I actually like my website for looking at things even more than Flickr because you can zoom in.
Yes.
And so I encourage people to go there, but
Which
no
is
one wants
yourname.com.
Yeah.
Can you spell your whole name for everybody?
Yeah, it's RyanSchude.com.
Right on. Thank you so much, and we'll be seeing you blowing our minds in the future.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
How great was Ryan? You know who we would sit in a tub for as long as it took as a toaster was dropped into it? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, Tony, Jordan, here's a simple toaster. Oh my God, here's a toaster oven. You know what, boys? Here's an oven that has a rotisserie and an air fryer in it. Every donation you hand over helps keep this insane project rolling. So shout out to our Patreons, Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Granke, Ben Welsh, Henry Furman, Jen Adams, The Lonely Chair, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, and Christina. Want to hear your name at the end of next week's show? Go to patreon.com/hereinla and give till it hurts. Also, shout out to our Angelinos. To be an Angelino, all you have to do is PayPal us $25 or more, and we will list you in the Here in LA website. That'll be done one day, and it'll be there forever. You will also be given a number to denote how early you got in. For example, Angelino number 1 is Allie Miller. 2, George Wright. 2A is George Wright again. Thanks for the burritos. 3, Rita Joanne. 4, Jason Sutter. 5, Grant Houghton. 6, Rob Baker. 7 is Kev Chang. 8, Brenda Garcia. And 9, John Griffiths. Just PayPal your hard-earned cash to busblog@gmail.com. Want to support us, but you're donating all your money to Planned Parenthood because a woman deserves the right to choose what happens to her own damn body? Couldn't agree more. But you can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook. Oh my God, post 2. If you see me tweet something about Here in LA, just retweet it. In fact, the earlier that you like one of the posts that you see on Facebook or retweet it, the better it is for the algorithm. So help us out if you can, and it's free. Tell your friends. Tell them how Here in LA is spelled, and it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who needs a ride to LAX at 4 a.m., Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and music supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Orgone and Jordan Katz. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and everyone out there who loves what they love, even if it's rollerblading. You be you, G Money. Taste the raisin.